Nice to see everyone. I'm Jonathan Kendall. Thanks for being here. I'll do my best to be valuable and succinct. So, my background originally is in copywriting. Before that, it was in my soul novel writing. So, I published a novel in my 20s and traveled around the country on a tour, published a novel sort of Jack Kerouac style. And that was my goal. But then realized, okay, making a living at that, there's literally about 20 fiction writers in the world that make over $1 million a year. And so, coupled with my desire to be free and have a lot of money, I said, okay, let me transition into copywriting. Copywriting turned into digital marketing. I was ghostwriting books for a lot of entrepreneurs, even ghostwriting some romance novels and all sorts of different things. Living abroad, sort of the 4-hour work week by Tim Ferriss, was living in Mexico and arbitraging currency that way. Ended up doing a lot of digital marketing, worked with Alex, started MentorBox, and then since then I've started a couple other companies. But when I saw Alex was starting Deal.ai, and then the idea of doing something with books around it was exciting for me. And so that was maybe 5 weeks ago. So just to give you guys a sense for how fast this can be done, we met in Puerto Rico, and here we are. So I can kind of walk you through the way that I think about building this and why I built it the way I built it so far. But that's a little bit of my background. If you have any other context that you want, Alex.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good background. The product has over 1,000 paying members now, if I'm not mistaken. Probably way more. I haven't looked at it recently. It's like every day it gets 30 to 50 new paying customers, and some of you guys on the call are members, but it also has a lot of members who do not know what Deal.ai is, which I really like because it is not about Deal.ai. Deal.ai is the underlying platform. It is about creating this awesome product that has a very unique reason for existence around Jonathan's expertise. And Jonathan, why don't you first talk high level? How many apps? How you're structuring it? How you're rolling out new apps? And the fact that I always like to build products that get improved over time. And I see this happening. Those of you guys, I saw some of the comments. You guys are doing it you guys already see that in front of your eyes. This platform is evolving. Jonathan, why don't you talk high level about how you think about the product? Let's focus on the product first, and what you've done and how you think about rolling new apps and services to your customers.
Yeah, I saw this really interesting post today from Adam Grant, who's a famous author, and he said that with AI, essentially the winners are going to have pattern recognition. And so the way that I think about book writing or business in general is breaking it down into its component parts. And so let's say that your desire is to write a book. Essentially, in my view, there's 4 reasons why you would write a book. One, you're an artist and you want to write a novel or a story, and essentially you're an artist. Another one is you want to leave something behind for your family. This could be a memoir, autobiography, something that's not necessarily for business, but it does the job of leaving something behind. Then you have the business authority arbitrage play, where you have a company, and the easiest way, I always say there's 6 objections whenever you're selling something, whether it's through copywriting or over the phone, or it doesn't really matter. But essentially, one of them is it worth the price? Is it worth the effort? And then 3 objections are from Jordan Belfort is I don't trust the person, I don't trust the company, I don't trust the product, and then ultimately they don't trust themselves. So those are kind of the 6 objections that I think. And you'll notice that 4 of them have to do with trust. And so in order to get someone's trust, in order for them to buy your product, saying I am an author in this realm is a pretty good way of earning their trust. It's a fast way to, if you don't have a lot of testimonials and you're just getting started, or you don't have a 10-year history in this particular field, by just saying, hey, I'm an author of this book and this book about this thing, very quickly you have authority, and then it'll increase your conversion rates on whatever your product or service is. So you have that world. Then you have the professor or actual business leader. Not to say that the authority arbitrage play is not, you can't write something good, but you're going to go faster because the point of it is to increase conversion. Whereas the if you're writing a big book, like a Start with Why or a Malcolm Gladwell book or a Naval Ravikant, you're essentially a philosopher of business and leadership and that sort of thing. And so those are the four main categories. And then within those categories, there's subgenres, right? So let's just take literature, for example. Within literature, there's romance, there's science fiction, there's fantasy, there's even I just watched a horror movie yesterday, so there's kind of the Stephen King genre, right? There's lots of different subgenres, and so now we have subgenres within the major categories, right? And so I think this, not to get off topic here with Deal.ai, but the same thing applies for within business. There's customer support. There's different types of marketing. Is it meta ads versus Google ads versus affiliates versus email marketing versus social media versus web design, right? There's all these different categories that you could attack your unique value proposition as a software company or as an agency. And the same thing applies to book writing. And so now that we have all these subcategories, you almost think of, I think of everything almost, my brain works like a matrix or an Excel sheet. And so you have these subgenres. And then within the subgenre, let's say now my goal is to write a fantasy book. Well, now what am I going to do? And the first step is always a big idea. What is the idea? What am I actually doing? So we need a series of apps now to help people come up with even the idea. Right now, once you have the idea, you need to expand it into essentially a structure. In novels, this would be the protagonist, the main characters, the villain, what's their goal, what's the setting, right? These kind of things. You guys know this even if you don't know it. Even if you can't articulate it, you know it because you've watched so many movies, and we're all sort of meta experts of stories, even though we don't realize it. But the idea of creating something is you have to see behind the scenes of what other people experience subconsciously. And so the first idea is, what's the premise? What's the big theme? Then the next step is, what's the structure? What are the main plot points? Then you have to outline a book chapter by chapter. So now we need an app that do chapter by chapter. And then once you have a chapter by chapter outline, you need a writer that can actually write the book. And then after you write the book, you need to edit the book. And then after you edit the book, you need to come up with a book cover. And then after you come up with a book cover, you need to publish it. So you need some marketing materials, right? So now for me, I'm fluent in this, and I can walk you through even the mini stages within each one of those. But the idea is that how can we take someone on a journey from step one, I want to write a book. In your case, you're going to translate that to, I want more leads, or I want my ads to perform better, or I want to send better emails, or whatever your service is that you're going to provide for whatever niche you're going after. And in my case, it happens to be, I want to write a book. That's the problem I'm solving. And so at every single one of these stages, I'm going to provide a solution that's going to allow them to get to the next step faster. And so that's essentially what I've done. Now, there are some that are ubiquitous, meaning like a character builder, right? No matter what we're doing, there's going to be character builders, or a research assistant. No matter what we're doing, you're going to need research. Or if you have a book and you want to translate it into a screenplay, then the formatting of a screenplay is much different than a book. And so everyone's going to need a screenplay writer. Does that make sense? And so the way that I'm doing it is essentially walking them through each one of these steps, and I'm building the apps. And I started with fiction and nonfiction because those are the biggest categories, right? And then what is the best-selling subgenre of fiction? Romance. Okay. What is the most difficult to write if you don't have a world? Fantasy. Fantasy also is the second highest selling. Now, the Pareto principle is very strong with fantasy, where most fantasy novels, firstly, are not finished, and then secondly, they don't sell very well. But the ones that do sell well sell for 300 years, and you change the trajectory of your family's life forever. But the problem is world building. So then I built a world building app. So anyways, this is the very high level how I'm thinking about which ones to build. And you'll notice if you're in the app, then this week, we're going to be building some apps that once you have your book done, it will build your book funnel, a little bit of marketing stuff. And then we're also going to do some more subgenres like science fiction and horror and those types of things. So those are the big ideas. I'm happy to get into the weeds of any of these apps, but that's why I'm choosing the apps that I'm choosing.
Great. Awesome. You guys see, like, the first step is reason for existence, which is you need a comprehensive platform to help people write books using this brand new technology. Reason for existence. Two, you need domain expertise, which in this case, Jonathan has it in spades. Okay. And all you guys have your own domain expertise in whatever it is. Three, think about it in a structured way. So now I have this domain, this product needs to exist. I know what needs to be done. Now I'm going to break it down into different apps like training and live training. And he's going to talk to you about different apps he's building and writing assistance. So you can actually chat with it to write it, and then you train them. Okay. So you have all sorts of, you have all the tools at your disposal, but with Deal.ai, but from tools to actual execution of a product that can blow up and help a lot of people and become a standalone big business, you need the first two elements, which is reason for existence, and then a domain expertise in a structured way, like how Jonathan laid it out. So Jonathan, do you want to talk about, first of all, talk about maybe the academies you've built? I think you have two, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So just this is another layer of the Venn diagram, but whenever someone's coming in and they want whatever you have, right? And in this case, it's I'm the ability to write a book. They're going to have the apps, but think about any software or any AI app. They always have essentially a help, right? And some of it is theoretical, some of it is specific, some of it is just support. And so we have support down here, right? We have a chat, and we also have an email support. So if there's a technical thing, then that's taken care of. But you also want to have this community, and you also want to have educational content, right? This idea of just a course or just an education or just an app or just a community, like I think that those days are gone, because now you can do all of the above, right? And so the first thing here is we do weekly training. And so I don't know if you guys have used this for yourselves, but we have, all the events that are coming up, right? So we have this Friday a specific lesson on writing memoirs. Then we have our own boot camp that we're doing, how to write a book in a day. Then we have how to create settings and world building for your book. And then we have our weekly orientation call for new members, which always has a lot of people. Okay. And so that every single week I'm updating this. So next week it might be about science fiction. Next week it might be about choosing the right stories for chapters in nonfiction business books, right? It just depends on whatever we're doing that week. But these are constantly rolling. Then you're going to want to record these, and then the recordings, you're naturally going to build an academy with these recordings. Okay. So this, again, we just started 5 weeks ago here, and we already have how to outline a nonfiction book, how to write great characters, how to outline a novel, how to do book funnels, deconstructing your genres, how to find your voice as a writer, how to finish your book if you're stuck, right? So this is a lot of content. Each one of these is 30 minutes to an hour. So, we're talking, 5+ hours of content when someone joins the platform immediately. And we're doing that through a weekly live call. So you're double dipping on the value whenever you're doing a live call if you record it. Then we have Bestseller Academy, and this is where we're essentially going over some great books. We're going over some Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, which is a classic for artists, A Lean Startup if you're writing a business book. This is like one of the greatest, ever. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? So we're adding one of these every couple of days at this point. Obviously, there's arbitrage, use softwares to your advantage there, but these are constantly being updated. And so you can imagine that when someone joins, you want them to use the apps, obviously, but you also want them, this idea of stickiness or churn. Essentially, most of you are going to have some kind of paid subscription, and the freedom of subscriptions is that you wake up and, oh wow, I had 20 people pay me while I was sleeping. That's amazing, right? So that's one part of the business. But another side of the equation is churn, essentially how many people are canceling or what percentage of people are canceling. And you want to give people a reason to stick around. And one of them could be, oh, every week on Fridays when we do our weekly live calls, I feel inspired. I learned something new. It's sort of a church habitual experience for me where we join together and it's amazing. And I'm going to stick around because I want to have access to this, right? So you can have community can reduce churn and therefore make your business more profitable. But also these author academies or these educational academies can also be something that you add. So some people might stick around just for the education. Some people might stick around just for the community. And then other people might stick around for the apps. And the ideal is that you have these super users that use all of the above, but to not use the academy feature, I think is not a good idea. So that's how you approach that. You guys have seen the community. This is just you guys all have the access to the community. This is just a good way to kind of communicate with people and it's a little bit of a Facebook. So I use that because some people are a little bit more shy, right? Some people are comfortable being in a community via writing, via their name. They're used to that through social media, through Instagram, through Facebook, whereas other people are more comfortable being on a Zoom call and chatting. And then there's probably some of you that are like, raise my hand. I want to be on screen and I'm going to talk. Right. And some of you are more extroverted and that's fine. But the idea is you want to give people different ways to communicate and engage with your, I mean, think about this, I call it author's den, but essentially the community wizard that you guys have can be as powerful as like Alex Hormozy's school, right? He just came out with school and he's blasting that everywhere, but essentially it's just it's kind of the Facebook group, but in a side, it's like monetizable Facebook group, right? In a simple app. And so, he's pushing that. That's fine for him, but you guys essentially already have that. So, one of the advantages here is you don't necessarily need to buy all these additional softwares for yourself, but you also don't need. This is an advantage, and this is what if I were you guys, I would argue whenever I'm selling a company anything to do with marketing or whatever you guys happen to be doing in business, is I would say, well, listen, by using this, you're actually saving a lot of money because you don't need to use all these other apps. And so the same thing applies in writing, right? It's like you don't need Grammarly, you don't even really need ChatGPT if you're using it to write novels. There's all sorts of other additional apps that you might have a subscription to Midjourney for book covers or all of these other apps. And by being a part of BookDaddy, you're actually saving money. So you're having a better product, and because you're consolidating the disparate softwares and the disparate AI apps into one platform, you can also argue on price. That's an advantage that you guys have. That's an advantage that we have. We don't dig into it too much because we're so on the cutting edge that there's not that the price argument isn't that necessary for the book writing because the publishing industry is just kind of old and we're pretty much on the cutting edge here. But okay, so that's that. I can transition into the apps, but I don't know, Alex, if you have any.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe give people some. Don't go through all of them, probably, but just maybe one genre or something.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about. I did a romance book I finished it, including the book cover in about an hour and a half one Saturday to give you an idea. And I started with this was the prompt. Okay. So it's very, it's super simple, right? You're starting, or maybe this was the one. Oh yeah. I tried a couple of them, but the idea is you don't have to be that, right? So it gives you the title of the book, book description. This is called a byline in the publishing industry. It's like your 30-second pitch, the setting, and then I also required it to give you an explanation for why it chose that setting. Because I don't want it to just say, oh, arbitrarily, here's the setting. It's like, no, it shows it for this reason. Thematically, it's going to be better for the story because of this way, right? Here's the plot, essentially, key plot points. This is an expert in all of it's like Robert McGee or John Truby or Hero with a Thousand Faces. That might not mean anything to you, but there's a lot of kind of classic structures of how to write books, and there's a really specific classic 20 chapter structure for romance novels. But anyways, it's trained in this behind the scenes essentially, right? So it's pulling things not randomly. It's pulling things in relation to knowing that you're going to spit it out into a chapter by chapter outline. So here's a protagonist, there's always a love interest, here's the subgenre, because there's always different subgenres. The key theme or lesson, this is like the big idea, the tone and style of the writing, subplot scenes, additional characters, side characters. So, this gives you a lot. Okay. So one of the things that I did though, is that you map on all of these title, description. You'll notice if you notice then we have, so this goes 1, 2, 3, right? Story generator, plot wizard. So now that I have the story, essentially, now I'm going to, this is an output that gives even more details, but then this is the wild part. It's a 20 chapter outline. Okay. And it's also set up in 4 acts, because most romance novels are in 4 acts, not 3 acts. And so you have chapter 1, the title, the setting, the description. These are called scene beats. And so there's literally individual scenes that have to happen in this chapter, and then the cliffhanger at the end of the chapter to keep them reading to the next chapter. And it literally it does the entire book, the 20 chapters, to give you a concept. So you could see how if you type in someone meets someone at dental school, and then 5 minutes later you have a 20-page and in 5 scenes in every chapter. So you're having 100 scenes that it established for you in order, with a cliffhanger at the end of every 5th scene to make you keep reading in 5 minutes. So this is, pretty wild. This is just for the romance, right? And then as a writer, you can see I was talking to it before, and then I asked it to actually write the chapter. And so it will literally write the chapter for you, as you can see. And so now that is a first draft. I'm an artist myself at heart, right? So I want to make it my own if I was to write this. But a lot of times, to get to a full draft, a finished 200-page draft of a book, is often a 6-month to year-long process, even if you're disciplined and 5 days a week for an hour or 2 hours a day sitting down and writing. And so switching from 6 months to 1 hour to get your first draft is essentially existential. It's paradigm shifting for the industry. And so the idea is, so this is, and again, that is if you want to just take it to the finish line and then say, okay, well, I'm going to now I'm going to do a book cover, right? I did this one. I said I wanted this was an example. I think, what did I say? This book cover is for baseball coaches. Make the cover minimalistic, like the cover of Malcolm Gladwell books. So if you know Malcolm Gladwell, he has these kind of very minimalistic covers. So I came up with this. So it just gives you kind of an idea of what's possible. And so, like, literally in 2 hours, you could have a finished novel. Now, you could also, it's almost even easier, honestly, for nonfiction. So I'll give you an idea of like the outline wizard for nonfiction. So let's say this was sort of my version of The Innovator's Dilemma. I don't know if you guys have read that, but it's a kind of a famous book. And so I was kind of walking the line between innovating versus having the safety of just improving what you already have, versus trying to be on the cutting edge of something new, and kind of the paradox of that as a leader, and when you should pivot and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the idea, right? And it gives a chapter by chapter outline. Here's the one difference between fiction and nonfiction is that every chapter essentially has a thesis. So the point of the chapter is to make a subpoint for the larger point, almost like a philosophy paper, right? So you have this larger thesis, and then there's premises essentially, which are mini theses, and then you have stories that prove out that thesis. Okay, so it gives supporting content, supporting stories, key takeaways, a callback essentially is in a nonfiction book that the way that the chapter ends will call back and finish the story from the beginning of the chapter, and then it segues. And usually it says, well, now that we found this out, that does leave a new problem, doesn't it? So let me go on to the next chapter, which will solve that problem. So that's how nonfiction books are essentially. It's segues is the nonfiction version of a cliffhanger, because you don't want to leave it a cliffhanger. You want to just say, now there's a new problem that we need to solve. So essentially, it's subtle, and there's more stories, right? Like there's a story about Amazon, or there's a story about Borders, right? So it gives you specific use cases that you can utilize. And again, this goes all the way through the entire 16 chapter outline of nonfiction. So these are a couple. This one I really like, because personally, fantasy writing is really difficult because of the world building. Not this. I'll go through this in 3 seconds. But the idea of before you can even start writing a fantasy or a science fiction novel is there's rules, right? What magic is it? Is there a sword? Is there, can you time travel? If you can time travel, how do you time? But there's all these there's the elves versus the people who can fly versus the people of the sea, and what is their lore and the history of the civilization. And there's just so much world building before you can write anything in fantasy, before you can even write a word. And so that's often a great writers won't even touch these genres because of how difficult it is to build a world. So this was for fantasy, describe the basic idea, and then what's a subgenre. So this was the input. Mars colony invaded by aliens. Will the time travelers from Earth save them? That's it. That was all I gave it. And then high fantasy essentially is a subgenre that's like literature, like Dune, for example. And it gives the title, the byline, the theme, the target audience, major plot points, tone and style, protagonist, goal, weakness, antagonist, goal, weakness. And then this is a new part of the app wizard, which is really exciting. There's so many use cases for this. I'm really excited for this. So if you guys are using this, but this is how I use it. Essentially, especially in screenplay, in the movie industry, there's this idea of a mood board, right? And so you can visualize it like, oh, okay, this is where I'm building. This is the visual representation of where I'm building, right? And then it gives the group and civilizations. So these are the colonists. It made up Etherean invaders, the Chrono Guardians, the Martian elements, the detailed description of each, the new traits of each, and then the main characters for each one, and a description of their powers. I mean, it's so cool. Like this something like this in 5 minutes. Now all of a sudden I feel, even personally, sometimes you want to solve your own problems as a business owner. A lot of great businesses started because you're solving your own problem. And for me, I've always dreamed of writing some high fantasy or science fiction, but the world building is just not up my alley. Whereas if someone says, oh, these are the 4 civilizations, these are the 4 families, these are the 4 guilds, whatever the plot requires, and here's the history of them, and here's the characters of them, and here's what it looks like, now I can start writing the book. So here's another way to think about it, is that someone might be really, really good at outlining, but they get hung up on the writing. And so, okay, well, then they're going to use the writer. That's great. Whereas someone might be a big idea person, but they don't know how to outline it into chapter. Their brain doesn't think in that pattern recognition way. Okay, well, maybe they have a chapter, but something is just not working in that chapter, right? They need an example, a story or something. Like this is interesting. I said the book title is AI Marketing for Plumbers, step-by guide for lower your operations and marketing costs by using AI business. And I said, I need a business example of a plumbing company that used AI so that I could see how that's relevant to a book. So it's a research assistant. This is, if you guys know, like Robert Greene and Ryan Holiday. Robert Greene wrote the 48 Laws of Power and Mastery and Seduction. He's one of the best-selling authors of our generation. Well, Ryan Holiday originally, who wrote The Obstacle is the Way and a bunch of really great books as well, he started out as his research assistant. That's how he got his job. So Robert Greene, if you read any of his books, are crazy. He's essentially a historian. He's making a point, but then he tells these really detailed stories for each one of his lessons. And so I thought, thinking, how do you get your own Ryan Holiday that picks out the exact perfect lesson? Because Google's not going to do it for you. And so here's the anecdote. There's an actual company. They used it with CRM. Here's the relevance and explanation. Here's the relevant facts and where they were from. Here's the context of how they actually, even with essentially a bibliography of citations. So, these are real stories with citations. So this is incredibly valuable if you're writing a nonfiction book. So I could go on and on, but those are just some of the ideas.
I almost don't want to interrupt you
Yeah.
because because it's just stimulating even to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I see it, guys, one, it obviously makes me very happy, because it's again, the goal here was to enable people like Jonathan to actually be able to do it. But it's one thing to imagine it, it's another thing to see it in action. So I really like it. Now, Jonathan, let me ask you a different question. So you're conducting weekly Zoom calls. So essentially, the formula we are using for BookDaddy is kind of like a tried and true formula, which is, I don't think of products as like, oh, this is a utilitarian product that just does this. No, I think of it as a community. And Jonathan is 100% like, we have worked together on Mentor Box. It's kind of like the same concept to both of us. So he's doing the same thing. He's doing weekly Zoom calls, live training that goes into the academy. And on top of it, he's doing a weekly orientation with for new members. Okay. So we do the same at Deal.ai. It's a cadence that I really like. So, Jonathan, do you want to talk about like when you do your Friday? I think it's Friday weekly calls. How do you think about topics and how do you make those super useful? You're a lot more structured than I am. I kind of get on these Sunday calls and riff, but Jonathan is like structured. So, talk about that. How do you think about it? How do you organize it?
Yeah. So 100% agree that it's incredibly valuable for community and for churn, like I said. But another element that I didn't mention, I don't think, Alex, you did either, is there's this concept in business called CDR, customer driven response. And so, especially when you're starting a company, you don't know the future version or which feature or which sub app or what people really want. Or maybe there's an app that's 80% there, but if you just give it this little tweak, all of a sudden everyone's going to be telling all their friends and it's going to go viral. Sometimes that actually happens, but you are in your own world. You're the inventor. You don't see it in the same way that your customer sees it. I actually brought on a bunch of my writer friends that are professional copywriters, and some of them even do ghostwriting novels. And I gave them all user access, and I said, just rip it apart and tell me what's right, tell me what's wrong, because I wanted people that are writers to use it themselves. But when you have a weekly call with everyone, you're getting, so it's you're not just teaching and saying, hey,
response.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting a response from people. So it's almost stupid not to do it, essentially. But with that said, how do you approach it? Well, there's a couple ways to think about it. One is let's say in my case, last week, well, we can just look at them just to give you an idea. The first one that I did was how to write a nonfiction book. Okay. Because I figured the most ROI positive, and this isn't even I figured, this is just true. The most ROI positive, whenever someone's buying something, the easiest way to convince them that it's valuable, remember that first objection, is it worth the money? If my answer to is it worth the money is not emotional, but it's if you put $1 in, you'll get $2 out, then it's transactional and it's a lot easier to sell. And so it's easier for a nonfiction author to say, oh, well, if I write this book, then I'll be able to sell more consulting, or I'll have more authority so I can sell more agency services, or my employees will respect me more, et cetera, et cetera. There's a series of things that are obviously financially beneficial to nonfiction books in the business world. And so I said, well, a lot of our customers will probably have come in thinking, I'm going to write a nonfiction book because it's ROI positive. And so the first thing that I did was, well, how do we write a nonfiction book? And so a nonfiction book to me is very formulaic. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't, just because most fantasy books are formulaic and most romances are formulaic doesn't mean that you still don't feel them fresh and anew every single time, right? Because it's how that author does it in a unique way, or is what makes it interesting. But nonetheless, there is a formula, and I know that formula. Most people don't, but I do. I've read 500 plus nonfiction books, and I've met with the authors and deconstructed them, and so I know how they are done. And so I go through them, and you can kind of see, I have like literally, here's the 16 chapters that you're going to need. And then you can almost, see outlining a chapter, that this is each individual subchapter. How would I do this? And so I set it up on Excalidraw. I don't know if you guys know this, but this is like a tool that I really love. This was the lesson from last week. So we were talking about how to, I do this in advance. Okay. So I'm not doing this live. Like, this is just an image that I create a couple hours before the call. And we were talking about, in this case, just as a case study, I was talking about how do you finish your book? Because a lot of people, a lot of the members, which I found out through CDR before, very rare was it that a member had nothing. If they just had the idea of, I want to write a book, it was very rare. Usually they had some idea, they had a character, they had a setting, they had 4 chapters done, they had a manuscript, but they couldn't finish it because they were hyper self-conscious and editing too much. There's a lot of reasons, right? Essentially. But what I said was, okay, let's get on a call and let me walk you through every single micro step that you're going to have to go through to finish the book. And I'll talk about how to remove the barrier for you to get to the next stage, essentially, right? And so even there, you can see how my brain works. It's okay, well, there's these 7 large steps. You have to come up with the idea, the plot, chapter by chapter, first draft, edit, then publish, and then marketing. But as you can see, let's just see editing here. For editing, there's lots of different kinds of editing. There's your plot editing. Does this chapter work? Then there's missing stories or bad scenes, for example. Then once you're confident in the chapter by chapter, then you do the sentence by sentence, then you do the grammar, and then you make it print ready. So my point here in this lesson was trying to tell people there's things that are holding you back. So let's say if you're running meta ads, right? Is the problem that your visual creative doesn't work? Is the problem that the description is bad? Is the problem that the actual copy is bad? Is the problem that there's something wrong with your CRM in the connection between the lead and populating into your CRM? When they're entering your CRM, are they getting email and text messages to tell them to do the next thing, whether that's to buy the product or to jump on a call, right? So this idea of deconstructing something to its smaller components is how I approach it. And so then, as you can see, the next week we talked about this was the week 2. So now we went to nonfiction. Well, let's go to the biggest category, fiction. Nonfiction first, fiction second, right? And so that was that. And then we say, okay, well, what are the subcategories within the larger categories? Genre, subgenre. So then this was week 3. So now that we have fiction and we have nonfiction, now we say, well, what is the difference between the subgenres, both for nonfiction and fiction? So that's what we did there, right? And so we say, okay, well, now that we have that, let's talk about how to actually sell, because essentially what I wanted to do, I'm really giving you how the sausage is made here, but this was my brain. It's like, okay, well, at this point, they essentially have the tools that are necessary, and they have the subgenres necessary that they can attack whatever book they wanted to write. So there might be someone this week that finishes their book. And we actually have a lot of people that have done that, and they submit for publishing, and we're reading a lot of them right now. And we're building a publishing company behind the scenes as well, which is another lesson about how to work with your customers and create partnerships, but an affiliate
lifetime value.
Yeah. Lifetime. Yeah. Essentially. Yeah. So you can have high ticket products, you can have subscription products, you can have bundled products, you can have, additional upsell apps, but you can also have partnerships. You can have affiliates. There's all sorts of ways of increasing the lifetime value. But essentially, I felt like I got people to the point where they're, okay, I know now I'm going to write this nonfiction book about leadership. That was in the first 3 lessons. So then the next step is, because these apps are so incredible, I knew that they could get to the finish line literally in 1 week. I said, okay, well, next week, let's talk about book funnels. What does it mean to, which I think is also really unique for my brain, is that I've done a lot of funnels, and I've written funnels and built funnels that have done tens of millions of dollars. And so a lot of writer, professor, here's how you write your great novel person doesn't necessarily also have the skill to create a marketing funnel. And so that to me was a really interesting way that I could bring more value to the community and speed up the process. And so then now they have the basics, and now we're going to get into, again, some of the bigger ideas. So like I wouldn't come up with a lesson on how to write a good protagonist, or how to write an antagonist, or how to write a buddy character, or right. So I'm saying, let's start big idea. So then we said, all right, how to write characters in general, right? So eventually if you come back in 5 months, we're going to have lessons on how to write a great love interest in this subgenre of romance, right? Because we've gotten all of the big ones out of the way. And so now we can be more hyper specific. And we also are going to have 50,000 people as members. And so even if only it's relevant to 500 people, it's fine, because they're going to come on the call and they're going to learn something about it, right? But anyways, big characters. And then we talked about how to find your voice. A lot of people were asking me over and over and over again, is this legal? Is this okay? Can I use AI? And so the idea was, what does it mean? What does it mean to have a writing voice? What does it mean to have a style? In a business, people call this unique value proposition, right? Like what is the thing that you do uniquely to other people? And so I talked about how to write in your own unique voice. And that was a little bit more sentence by sentence. And then we talked about how to finish your book. So we're still, even though we have these lessons, in my eyes, we are still incredibly high level. Like we haven't got into the granular of almost anything. But that's fine, because the first things that you need to do when people are joining is make sure that they have the generalities. And also there's this concept called Dunning-Kruger effect, which is really interesting, where for a beginner, you've never played the piano, and you get one lesson, and by the end of the lesson, you can play Mary Had a Little Lamb. And now you think in 3 weeks, you're going to be a virtuoso, because you're like, oh, wow, the piano is actually easier than I thought. And you misinterpret how difficult it is to master something, because essentially it's asymptotic. And so, your gains are diminishing returns. But one interesting thing that I only recently realized, and I forget where I read it, but the opposite end of the spectrum is also interesting, of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where once you reach mastery, things that you think are easy are very complicated to a beginner. And so if you've put in 10, 20,000 hours in your domain, for me, I said, to me, these 7 videos we're still on the surface of what it means to write a book, right? But because I could do a 20-minute video on the difference between Hemingway and Susan Collins, for example, right? Susan Collins is the author of The Hunger Games, right? So, stylistically, and what does it mean for literature? And I can go down that rabbit hole, but it's basically useless for a beginner. And so, but for me, the chapter by chapter outline and the meta chapter outline, that is actually really advanced for a beginner. So don't be afraid of doing something that you think is simple and easy, because for someone else that's just starting, it might be really advanced.
Yeah. Great. Couple questions that I saw in the chat. One was outputting from one app, custom app, to another app. Right now, the way Jonathan built multi-section helped with that a little bit. Some of these apps were built before multi-section, but at the same time, trust me, I know the pain point, and we're working on that. So we're working on how to make that flow work as well. Jonathan is actually, I have my engineers and Jonathan in one WhatsApp group, and he's constantly telling us what to do. And that is, think of it this way, being a customer of your own product helps a lot. Again, customer-driven response. So Jonathan gets response from his members to improve his product, and you guys and Jonathan, you guys are my customers, and I am really tuned into what you guys need, and we're constantly building. But here's the good news. The good news is we are not perfect. Jonathan's BookDaddy is not perfect. But the good news is we are on the cutting edge, meaning even though we are imperfect, we can win because nobody else is doing it. That's where you want to be. So the way I think about it at high level is that going to the right place, right time, right market, have a reason for existence, create a good offer, like a product that they, like, don't be just product focused, be community focused, training focused, all the things that Jonathan talked about, and then iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. Okay. That's at least a formula that has worked for me in my life. And I'm going to stick to that. I'm too old to try anything else. So I'm like, what's your reason for existence? Do you have the beachhead to enter that market with that reason for existence? Get a few customers in, no matter how imperfect, because you're standing tall in this world where nobody else is playing, and just iterate and run fast and run fast and iterate and improve. Okay. The other question I saw, I think Nicole asked about an app store where the apps can go into a marketplace. I have a little bit of mixed feeling about it, meaning I think, for example, Jonathan, this company is creating is really around his core competency and expertise. It's one thing to give you guys the tools. It's another thing for Jonathan to push into an app store and then other people use it. I'm not against it. It's just like a thing I need to think about. And I do, just out of curiosity, Jonathan, would you share your apps with others to sell in their white label? Just like, you can be honest.
Some of them,
Some of them. Okay.
but
Yeah, I
not
think,
just a blanket. Yeah, not a blanket. Yes, I'd have to think about it.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think for most people who are actually putting a lot of energy into building their AI solution, I mean, do you want it to kind of, I don't know. I kind of have.
I
Uh,
I think that we're good at marketing and so you're not really solving my problem essentially by putting it into your app. It's not a 50-50 trade at that point because we're with or without an app store, we're gonna blow this up. Whereas if I built this amazing app, but I'm not very good at marketing and I don't know how to run the business, or I don't maybe have money to do user acquisition. And then in that case, obviously it's incredibly valuable because you're using the collective network of everyone. But in this case, we are also good at marketing. And so I'm hesitant.
Yeah. So, okay, just we don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much, but let me explain this. One, everything he built, this entire product is built using our white label. There is nothing hard coded like behind the scenes extra advantage that he has. Okay. So you guys, you guys have your own expertise, just like Jonathan, you can sit and build this exact same thing. You won't have the same expertise as Jonathan, but you're expert in something else. You can build literally everything here is built using Deal.ai out of the box. Okay. So it's like there's nothing hard coded here. Okay. So you can build it yourself. That's the first thing. Second, I understand the desire to take someone else's apps and say, okay, I'm going to seed my own white label solution, AI software solution with that. I understand the desire for it. And maybe, like I said, at some point, it's obviously it needs to be opt-in, like the Jonathan wants to sell his product. But ultimately, the way I think about it is that a good enough reason for existence? Meaning somebody else takes BookDaddy and puts another logo on it, even if the royalty is given to Jonathan's company, BookDaddy. Is that like, does that white label of a white label, does it really need to exist? I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, and I'm not gonna hash out that question right now. It's a thing I'm thinking about. Okay. Okay. Can we have output in PDF? It's coming. Output as PDF is coming. So Jonathan has been asking for input, PDF input, and output as PDF. Trust me, like we are very, very. I know half the things that you guys ask for is already in the works, or we are aware of it already. Okay, so for affiliate on BookDaddy, I don't think Jonathan has rolled out affiliate as a feature, but maybe I talk to him later. That could be another way to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One other question I have for you, Jonathan, in terms of like right now, it seems like you have like what, 28 apps or something.
Yeah.
I think 5, 6 of them are out of the box, right? So system apps. Is that right? How many?
Yeah.
How many? Yeah,
Generator, funnels, domains,
that's 4.
writing planner, notes, document vault.
Okay, so that is 7. No,
Yeah.
6. 6 out of 28. Again, you guys see the concept here. So when you're building your own white label, think about, okay, what comes out of the box that I can use, and then but don't stop there. Build your special flair, and that should be actually the majority, in my opinion. If you ask me, again, my opinion, we are tool builders. You can build whatever you want with it, but my opinion, it should be mostly around your core competency, your unique reason for existence, and then use our system apps kind of like in things like storage, which is Vault, or to-do list, or task flow, which he used it as writing planner. It's like a really good actually writing planner tool. I didn't even
Yeah.
think
The
of it.
idea would be like, like finish second edit of chapter, like, this is keeps you organized. And so
Yeah,
this is incredibly valuable, but I just changed
yeah,
the name and made it contextualized to writing a book.
great. So somebody asked, how long did it take you to create these, Jonathan? Can you just give us a rough high level view?
Well, it's interesting because the first we had an MVP, a minimum viable product, and I didn't touch the MVP for probably in terms of the apps for 3 weeks. So I was doing we redid the funnel on the front end, some marketing stuff, and but yeah, all these apps are in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So essentially, you would say, in 14 days, you built like, let's say, 15 apps. So one app a day type thing.
Yeah, yeah. I jokingly have this
Yeah, you said one
thing
app a
where I say
day.
project app a day, and then
Yeah.
I also have the engineers one new feature a day.
Yeah. Elaine says she's a BookDaddy member, not aware of weekly calls. You see that weekly live training? It is bookdaddy.ai/Zoom. And you
Yeah,
can see the timing. You can register, add it to your calendar and
yeah.
all that.
You
All you guys can build live training now for your white label. Okay.
yeah.
There's an app for that now. Okay. So um, maybe another question. This is more of a strategic high level. I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to ask you the question I wanted to ask. BookDaddy was a product that needed to exist. So given how important it is, I mean, books played a big role in my own life, and I suppose in a lot of you guys' lives, and how important it is to actually be able to establish your authority in a field by writing a book. It's not the only way, but it's a fast, quick way. I mean, it's just the way us as humans like document our expertise. Now with AI, you can document it in the form of knowledge base, but let's say the traditional way of doing it is through books, right? So this company needed to exist, and this is the point I'm gonna try to make. Sometimes you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. So when we launched BookDaddy, I hadn't talked to Jonathan in a while, okay? Or he just had messaged me completely randomly, not even knowing that we were going to launch this, or maybe we hadn't even launched this. He's like, I'm going to be in Puerto Rico for whatever reason. Are you around? I'm like, yeah. And I told him about it in person in Puerto Rico after we launched. Okay, so where am I going with this? Sometimes you need to put the shovel in the ground, get the project started, come up with reason for existence. Like, no, I'm going to create this company because it needs to exist. It's an important company. I may not have all the pieces. In this case, I could have been doing like this at 1% the level Jonathan does it. Like Jonathan is like literally 100 times better than, maybe even more. Okay. It would have been like a rudimentary product had I built it. And in fact, that's what Jonathan got. the rudimentary version that we had built. It looked at it, I'm like, what the hell is this? So, but sometimes you got to start that way. And the beauty of getting started, meaning reason for existence, something important, an important mission, but then it started, okay? Even though you may not have every piece, including in this case, the actual expert, okay? But you just put the shovel in the ground and the right elements kind of magically, call it universe, whatever it is, it appears, okay? Like literally, I don't think I told you about BookDaddy until you came to Puerto Rico, right? We never talked about it, right?
No.
Okay. So it's serendipity, putting the word out in the universe. I don't know what the hell it is, okay? But that's why I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a foo-foo thing, and I'm not really into foo-foo type talking, but in general, find important causes, missions, reason for existence, create it and put the word out in the universe, okay? And the missing pieces appear. It's weird, okay? So that I think is an important thing. I just my life lesson essentially. And then I'm like, we showed up in Puerto Rico and we had dim sums, and I think we had lunch and we were actually even running ads, and you had seen my ads. And we talked to her. I'm like, Jonathan, can you do this? So it's that's what I'm saying. Put a word out, start it, create reason for existence, put a word out, and the puzzle pieces kind of appear. Okay. Yeah. When the students are ready, the sandbox appears. Yeah. Those kind of things. I mean, so I'm more of a scientist engineer in the background, like as my background. So I'm less into foo-foo, but honestly, this aspect of it is very important. That's why I'm like, just create the thing. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, I think there is a scientific aspect to it because our brains are really good at filtering out everything that's not important. Like there's a the type of metal that's in your computer right now that you're watching, or how many pixels are on the screen. Like there's data everywhere, right? So there's infinite data for everything that you could ever imagine. If you decided that you wanted to, I don't know, scientifically figure out how many atoms are in your cup of coffee, you could do that. That is a fact. And so the idea is that our brains are really good at distinguishing between what's important and what's not important. And so if you start focusing on a problem that, which is a good problem, like a problem you created, like I created this thing, it's out in the world, and now I need a leader, or now I need to get leads, or now I need to build a funnel, or now I need to sell it, or now I need to do some customer support, which means that I need to learn customer support. Whatever that next problem is for your business, if it's out in the world, you're outside of your own head, which is not a really good way of figuring. CDR is not my own head driven response, right? It's you need data from the real world, feedback from the real world. And so if you put it out there, an MVP, just something, the next problem will show itself. And because we are problem solving, we're teleological beings, right? Target fixated, then you'll start focusing on that problem, and then the answer will show up, which could be serendipitous, and it could be prayer. It depends on what you think, but it also could just be, if you're looking for everything that's red, you're going to see everything that's red. Whereas if you're looking for everything that's green, you're going to see everything that's green. So there's a scientific explanation, I think, for this level of focus. So I agree, just getting it out there. And then also, I think, a lot of times thinking about something is just procrastination. And also, unfortunately, it's insecurity, because you're attaching your self-worth to the outcome of something that you create. And whereas you need to attach your self-worth to the process of being someone who tries things, or being someone who learns things, or being someone who is attempting to get better, or being someone who is trying to build a business. That can be your foundation. That's really rock solid. I am someone who tries businesses and sometimes fails. Well, now that's an incredible identity. Whereas if you are I'm insecure, and if this doesn't work, then I'm ruined, and it means I'm a bad person, and I'm bad at business, and I'm a bad man, I'm a bad woman. It's like, well, then you're falsely attaching your and we know this, we don't teach children to be obsessed with the outcome, right? We say like, oh, good job in trying, and this is what did you learn, and that sort of thing. So you just have to have a beginner's mind in this case and just put it out there and not attach your identity to it, because it's like, welcome to the club. No kidding, it's not very good in the beginning. Like, it's delusional to think that in the beginning it's going to be amazing, and you you just gotta have some self-awareness and be okay with it not being perfect in the beginning.